I'm sitting here with Cameron Hermansen, and
Hermanson.
we've
Yep.
just found out that he has roots in the Nordic countries, so I know how to pronounce your surname. So you have a story to tell about Parkinson's.
I was diagnosed at 38 years old. I'm now 43. I've had it about 5.5 years. My first symptoms started about the time, it's hard to, everybody who has Parkinson's knows it's hard to really pinpoint an exact date of when it started, but I would have to say probably about 5 years before I was diagnosed. About 5 years before I was diagnosed, my dad, I worked with in a family business, died suddenly and unexpectedly, and I went from everyone's coworker to everyone's boss. It was really a stressful time. My mother, she was on hospice for many years, and I believe that was when my first part of my Parkinson's started, because I think I just couldn't handle the loss of my father was. I just had never lost anybody. I noticed my symptom wise is I would hold my right arm up against my chest, and I would just favor my left arm. I'm actually left-handed, and then I wouldn't swing my right arm when I would walk. My mom died in 2018, but I knew I had something seriously wrong probably 6 months before she died. Really knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to worry her. So I started looking into it and Dr. Googling myself, and it just got worse. And, worrying about it just made it really worse. And then August of 2018, my mom died. September of 2018, I went to my first neurologist appointment. And what was really weird about it is that they thought it was a nerve issue because my hands were moving too slow. They did a nerve study, and my nerves were fine in my hand. And then 3 months later, in December of 2018, I was diagnosed with a DAT scan. What's really interesting is once I figured out that I had it, I remember going to work and puking multiple times a day because of my anxiety. I just got worse so quickly, so quickly. I had a friend's dad who was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he had had Parkinson's for about 20 years, and he was diagnosed the same exact age as I was diagnosed at 38. So my thoughts patterns went back to my friend's dad.
So did you have a DAT scan, or had the neurologist already said that you have Parkinson?
No, no, I had a DAT scan. I did have a DAT scan. Yep.
So there was no
That,
doubt.
no doubt, no.
What did the doctor tell you about your future?
That's what I remember about it is how cold they were. They, I asked them about my lifespan, and they said you won't really lose that many years of your life. But remember, I knew one of my best friend's dads who was diagnosed, and it was ugly. So I can extrapolate and figure out what 20 years of Parkinson's would be, 25. And I just assumed I would be exactly the same way.
So
But
you didn't need the doctor to tell you anything bad because you already knew.
but the thing about when he was diagnosed, there was no hope. This was, in the late 80s. It was much worse out. They didn't know what they know today about Parkinson's. They don't know about exercise. And
Which information inspired you to start doing something yourself?
for a long time, I was in denial because when I did a DAT scan, I wanted to logically basically deny that I had Parkinson's. I really think the most important thing, we'll go on later, but is controlling your mind and controlling your thoughts and giving yourself hope.
So what happened sometime in this process you start having hope?
What
What did you do?
changed? With my business, it's very stressful. And part of my business, I sell tractors, farm tractors, Kubota tractors. And one of the major stressors of Kubotas is, or of any business when you sell machinery, is the service part of it. Helping customers. Good mechanics are extremely hard to find. But it just happened to be about the same time I was diagnosed, a really good guy. His his name is Matt. He works for me, and he is a godsend. And his dad got diagnosed about the same time as my friend's best dad got diagnosed, and he's had it for 35 years, and he's still living at home. And that's the very first part when I figured out, maybe not everybody's Parkinson's is going to be the same.
So that was your turning point, that you've heard about someone else that has Parkinson, but doing okay.
That started it. It gave me a glimmer of hope. I wouldn't call it a turning point, but it gave me some real, genuine hope. I've only been doing good for probably the last year. So there's 3, 4 years in there that I just accumulating hope, nuggets of hope. I have an unbreakable will. The job that I have, I used to be the main guy that ran the whole show at the dealership, but I hired a guy that is just as good or better than me, and I turned into the delivery man. So I really enjoy delivering things, equipment, and I listen to books, audiobooks, and podcasts, and just expand my mind. I really think that learning, I think they've done studies where people who learn, they grow new neurons as they learn, and I'm addicted to learning just about everything, and I think being curious is super helpful. And then I have that guy who I told you about, Kendon, who I hired to replace me. I have Matt, who takes care of the stress of the shop, and then I also have my secretary, also runs the show. She's been with me for 35 years. She picked me up from the second grade, and I'm 43. I think Parkinson's patients really need to have purpose. You have to have a reason to keep going. But the diagnosis process basically tells you that you're doomed.
Yeah.
And and because they wear a white coat and they're, the doctors, you believe them. And guess what? That's what you do. I really think people who have Parkinson's, if they just keep listening to the doctors, they keep telling you you're going to get worse. So what do? You get worse. It's just like people who say they get cancer. You're going to die in 6 months. And guess what they do? They die in 6 months.
It's called the nocebo effect. If somebody tell you something bad will happen and you believe it, there's a bigger risk that it will happen. And the placebo effect, it's that somebody gives you hope that you will become better, and then you will become better. And it is proven in thousands of studies from 1960s, where they started to make studies where they check these two groups, the ones that get the real medication and the ones that get placebo medication. And 1 in 3, it's enough for them to get the hope that they become better, to get the pill that is just sugar.
I think that's what the key to Parkinson's really is. I think you're onto something. If there's enough people like me that can show that Parkinson's can be stopped, I mean, I'm literally on my starting dose of levodopa. I've been on as much as twice as much medicine as I've been, and I feel better than I have.
What did you do? You read a lot of books and started a personal development, I guess.
So what I found, the number one thing that has helped me, it's not what I exactly started with, but the one that is the most powerful that I want to stress the most is, I'm sure you've heard of Wim Hof.
Yeah.
So Wim Hof for me is so inspirational. I tried to meditate for a long time, to do other types of meditation. Only when I had Wim Hof with the cold exposure and the breathing techniques could I actually control my mind. Before that, I would try to control my mind and I couldn't do it. I mean, I would try and try and try, but the problem is, don't think of a pink elephant. what do you exactly think of? A pink elephant. And when you have these Parkinson's symptoms that are constantly bothering you, I mean, how do you not think about it? Because I would get mad. I would get irritated with my symptoms, and especially everybody around me bringing it up. People who don't know any better. I live in a small community, and everybody oh, how you doing? I'm doing fine. I'm Cameron. I'm not Parkinson's. I know people mean well, and only when I figured out the Wim Hof method is when I was able to change, started to
So
control my body.
how long time did it take for you to sort of turn the ship around?
You start turning the ship, and then it's kind of like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And what happens with me in the past was that I would go 3 steps forward, then I'd go 5 steps back. If you think it's going to be a linear path right to perfect, to health, you're wrong, you know. And I'm still finding stuff out. In the effort of helping yourself, there is benefit. There is happiness in the effort.
You have a clear purpose. You want to be back in good health again. So you are not
Yes.
in doubt. Why do I do Wim Hof one more time? I do it because I have the purpose.
By having Parkinson's, you probably have the same type of personality as me. And that's what got you sick. But I think in the same token, if you can, that's what can make you better. The same thing that made you sick can make you better.
That's a good, I've heard that before. So if we should be a little nerdy here, what would you think that were your personality that drove you down the wrong lane?
I was thinking about death when I was 10. I just worried so much about the future that I wouldn't live in the present. I remember a lot of my formative years when I got to like uh, ninth grade. They call it high school in the United States. I was worried about growing up so much because, I hate change. I'm so nervous about the future. I want everything to be the same. And it's just been a lifetime of being messed up of my thought process.
How did these cold baths change your perspective on future?
I have a cold plunge, which is basically like a hot, backwards hot tub. It's like 39 degrees. The Chinese believe that we are stuck in fight or flight. They call it Parkinson's stuck. So
Me
what
too.
you put yourself in these fight or flight situations, being in this cold water, but you force your mind to say, "Hey, I'm okay. Hey, hey, I'm in charge. Body, I'm in charge." And you do that every day, and you basically force your mind to be calm. And then throughout the day, when you have that urge to go into fight or flight, you say, hey, I'm okay. And that's why it's so powerful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that you can say that you can call it exposure therapy. So you expose yourself for extreme danger because if you stay there for an hour, you will probably dead. So you expose yourself for this low temperature, but so you experience the fight and flight. You want to jump up the water, but you force yourself to stay a little. And by doing that, you calm down. And so you learn your body that you even your body wants to push you into fight and flight, that it's okay to relax and stay a little longer.
Yep, that's exactly right. And then when you do that first thing in the morning, it's the hardest thing you're going to face that whole day.
Ah, yeah.
I mean, that's the hardest thing. So the rest of the day is easy because my mind is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And you keep doing it, and your mind keeps getting stronger and stronger. Do it every day. And there's every single time I get in that bath, I don't want to get in it. Every single time I go in that bath, I say, I don't want to do this, but I want to fight Parkinson's more. So it's really, really effective. It's making myself mentally stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
You know, it's not so much about the cold water I think there is because it does increase dopamine by a lot, as much as cocaine does. I mean, but there's no drop in dopamine. That's the thing that's so effective about the cold plunge is every time you take a dopamine hit, you eat a cookie or you do a Facebook post or something, you have a spike in dopamine, but then there's a correlating or right after it, you have a drop, a corresponding drop in dopamine. And then your overall levels of dopamine go down every time you do that. So with the cold plunge, you get the up, but without the down. It's amazing. Everybody, not just Parkinson's patients, you feel like you could jump through a wall. I mean, after you get done with it, especially those who have Parkinson's, because Parkinson's is lack of dopamine.
What if it's the other way around, that you maybe don't need that extra dopamine, especially not you, because you are a lot better now. So I would get what would help you the most is to start reducing the dopamine a little.
Oh,
Because
never
now
thought
you're
about that.
back, your mental state is back on track. You are, and we call it, you are calm, as you say, the rest of the day. So you don't need the extra dopamine. So that's what will help you the most.
I'm eventually going to try that.
If your symptoms was 10 around diagnosis, or when it was the worst, it was 10. How big are your symptoms now?
Probably a 3 or 4. But what I'm getting to the point when I would take medicine, it would get me back to 3 or 4. It wouldn't get me to 0. It'd never get me to 0. So now I'm getting to the point where if I'm all the time at about a 3 or 4, the medicine doesn't really help. Does that make sense? Like I don't live without symptoms, but the symptoms are not improved by the medicine because it never
Yeah,
got me to 0.
that's why it's good to reduce them, because then you can skip the side effects.
Yes, exactly. It's the cure is worse than the disease at this point. I mean,
What does the doctor say about you?
my first neurologist said that all we're doing is managing your symptoms. We're not doing anything for the disease, for the underlying process. So I'm on my fifth neurologist. My fourth neurologist was my favorite one, and she's the one that I credit with a lot of my turning point. Really, she was an older lady, and she actually retired after like the third time I saw her. But she got my ship turned around, and thinking about it, that's one of the other nuggets that turned me around. And she got me into the mindfulness, which she was one who told me about mindfulness. Who then I tried mindfulness, but I couldn't do it, and then I found Wim Hof, and then for me that was the changing point. So
That's amazing to hear about, because there's not a lot of doctors that point you in that direction.
no, and I still keep in touch with her. I tell her I love her because she changed my life. My goal is to get off medication completely, all pharmaceuticals, but I don't know if I'll be able to reach that, but I think I can. But
Of
I'm
course you
not.
can.
Yes, I think you should just stop listening to I mean, don't listen to their bad news, their nocebo. I mean, don't. I mean, you go to the doctor. Every time I go to the doctor, I feel worse. I do need the medicine once in a while, and all I want to do is get refills of the stuff that works.
So you have talked a lot about the mental stuff, mindfulness, and that's, can you say, my area of expertise. It's how people stress themselves up, and I can help them to reduce stress again by digging into their private areas of stress. What's your thought around that? Because, the cold bath is like go into the water, stay there, and go up again, and you feel all the benefits from them. But you're talking a lot about your mental health as well.
So yes, that's the key. So I grew up in a really high demand religion that didn't do my mental state any favors. like I always felt inferior. And I actually don't go to that church anymore. And I don't know if it's the church or the way my interpretation of the church. It felt like I was carrying around in my subconscious a bunch of excess baggage that I didn't even know really existed, but was deep down below my conscious awareness. Whenever I would feel anxiety and depression and I felt like I wasn't okay, I would have this tightness in my chest. It was right in the middle of my chest. And it was black. It was dark black. And it was almost like the consistency of black oil. And I let that go. And it was life changing. Like I let go of so much trauma. And I don't know what happened because I don't really remember. But I knew that I let go of that trauma. And that's ultimately the turning point. I mean, all of these things are turning points, but that was one of the major turning points, letting go of all of the trauma. I've always had very low self-esteem. Even though I was good at things, I never thought I was good enough. And it was really surprising because I was quite successful. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I always felt inferior. And
You
wherever
can
I have,
say that that's what I found out as well, that we can do so many things in order to help ourselves free of these old traumas. And I'm a biologist and have this background as a coach and therapist, and that's where my journey started, that I find out I could help people with Parkinson. And then I got curious, what was this all about? And then I digged more and more and more into it and found everything that we're talking about here, that you need hope, that the placebo and nocebo effect has a big role, that we can deinstall trauma. And then there's a lot of, can you say, I call it the 4 strategies, where this about exposure therapy with Wim Hof is one of the many things you can do to help yourself out. So I found out the whole package.
that's awesome. I honestly listened to a couple of your other interviews and they were very good, but I need to listen to all of them. So
That sounds good. And that's why I'm collecting all these, because people need the turning point. They need all to collect their own handful of nuggets that build the hope. And when the hope is big enough, it ignites the faith of course, I can also become better. So you and I are planting these seed, these nuggets in all people, because if there's one that can become better, so can you. The guys that are listening right now, they can also become better. It's not easy. It's not your own fault that you ended up. It's history. It's your family stories, all the beliefs and values that were filled in your head when you were a child. But here we have the hope that you can become better. So you is helping people to start the process so they can collect. So my YouTube channel is all about collecting good stories so we can help more people to ignite their journey to better health.
that's perfect because I think that's the key to fighting it.
So what does the doctors tell you now when you visit them?
They don't even do a test. They don't test my. They just ask me what the pills I want. They don't do it. They don't do a test anymore. My new neurologist, so the one I loved so much, retired, and then I got his replacement, and he's fine, but he's just he doesn't. He just says, "What pills do you need?" And I tell him what I want, and then I leave. I
So
don't
he's
really.
not curious. Has he noticed that you have become better? I mean, he has the journal. He hasn't seen it himself, but he has the journal.
I don't know how he'd ever check it because I'm sitting down when he comes in, and he talks to me. He hasn't done one exam with me ever. I've been to him no, 2 or 3 times. He's never done an exam with me ever to even check me out. He just wants to give you pills.
You can
He didn't
say
even,
that you talked about um, Miss Lee in the start. She is doing the job that every neurologist should do, collecting data around this, because nobody around the earth has got the study that tells all about this. So I collect people that become better, and I'm pretty sure I can explain a lot of the reason why they become better. And Miss Lee is also collecting a lot of things. Unfortunately, she hasn't got a lot on the mental side. She hasn't got a question like, do you visit a psychotherapist or a psychologist? But she has, for example, are you stressed? Do you feel lonely? And being lonely and stressed is sort of the worst thing you can do in regard to your Parkinson disease. And in her perspective, the best thing is exercise, for example, but she do not collect data around, for example, psychotherapy.
you can do all the physical things you want, but if you don't fix the mental portion of it, you're never going to get better because every people who have Parkinson's have some degree of mental aspect. Some are more of a physical disease, some are more mental disease.
You can
And
say it in another way that we are both mental and physical. It's interwoven. So it's more than some people can feel the physical things and some people can better feel the mental. And there's so many, do you call it stigmas? There are so many things to be embarrassed about around your mental health. So we rather not talk about it. So it's so much easier to talk about the physical symptoms. So that's your body and mind goes 100% together. So by taking both into account, you can start your way to become better.
you're exactly right. So I work out 6 days a week. I work out every other day, weight training, resistance training. And I used to do super heavy weight, but I do pretty heavy weight, but not super heavy. And then the other days that I don't, I I do the I do cardio for 1 hour. But the thing that I do that's so helpful to me is I do the cold plunge and I'm really cold, and then I go ride the exercise bike for 1/2 hours as hard as I can go, and then I get back in the cold plunge again and do that, and then I do the another for another half hour. The combination of warming up and doing the cardio, I've had multiple people notice say you're walking so much better. Like you're I've had multiple people say that, I and when you walk weird, it's hard to to make it look better. At least my walk, and I've been able to make it look much better. And
So
so
you talked about fight, flight, and freeze and getting stuck in that. So just to unfold that a little. So an animal in fight, flight, and freeze, you are a hunter, so you have seen animal running. So when you are stressed, what does the animal do? They run or they fight, depending on the situation. And what is run? It's exercise. It's a good way of getting rid of your build up fight, flight, and freeze. It's getting rid of the adrenaline. That's
uh,
why it is so strong to exercise. So you get stressed, something is going on in your company, or before that with your parents, you got very stressed. And then an human, we sit on our chairs and do nothing, and the stress build up and build up over the roof. The animals, as soon as they sense a danger, they have a look around what's going on, and then depending on the situation, they run or fight or freeze behind a tree if the danger is too close. So they use the full circle of instincts. Humans, not. We get as scared or anxious or angry as the animals, but what do? Nothing. All the adrenaline is just stuck in our body, and it can take days to get rid of if you sit on your chair. But if you go out and doing some cardio of some sort, you react as the animal does.
I've never heard about that, but that makes a lot of sense. You're basically relieving yourself of that. And that's why it feels so good, because you're basically, whenever you exercise, you always feel calm. And it's the best antidepressant you can do. I mean, if you exercise every day, it's hard to be depressed. You know, it you really it's really hard. You have to think about being depressed. But if you just sit on your butt, and I think another thing that was so crucial now is all this information. You know, our information overload has made us that tension you talk about, that fight or flight. We're constantly in it. That's why I believe.
You put on your television or phone or radio and you get an injection of adrenaline.
Yep, yep, you're exactly right. And I noticed, it's funny you say that, because the more I turn off my television and just live and ignore all of the outside influences, just interact with people on a day-to-day basis, and just the better I feel. You know,
Yeah.
it's
So, do you agree with me that adrenaline has a big role in stress?
yes, I believe that people who are in Parkinson's don't know how to relax. I mean, they don't know how to not be like, I don't think I knew, you know, for those years being diagnosed, how to shut it all off.
So can you feel when you have can we call it a high in adrenaline?
Oh, yes. Yes. And it's not good. Like, that's why for me, it's so important, because without Wim Hof, I can't control those urges to go into fight or flight, or without Wim Hof and the breathing techniques, you know, I think that that's the crucial way. You know, I don't know if Wim Hof is for everybody, but you have to find your own way to basically shut off that danger, that adrenaline. You have to shut that off as much as possible.
So have you ever investigated the relationship between adrenaline and dopamine?
No, I haven't.
So how do you think it's related? That's a trick question, because I'm now finding a picture around it. So what do you think?
I mean, hypothetically, I think they would be inverses of each other. As the more adrenaline you have, the lower the dopamine. Maybe.
Are you ready? I'll share my screen and see if you get the same shock as I did. What do you think about this?
I mean, doesn't that does mean that dopamine eventually turns into, it's converted into adrenaline. So you use up your dopamine by, isn't that what that means?
The more dopamine you eat, the more adrenaline you'll get.
Say that again. Say that again.
The more dopamine you eat, the more noradrenaline, the more noradrenaline, the more adrenaline.
Oh, it's like so the dopamine you eat, you mean taking meds?
Taking meds leads to,
Adrenaline.
and adrenaline is,
It's like a vicious cycle. Oh, holy cow. I've never seen that. Why?
I'm a biologist, but I learned this already in high school. When I saw this the first time, I nearly fell off my chair. And I have for 2 years, I've studied that I could help people with trauma reduction. I found what I call the 4 strategies to better health. And then I'm, for some reason, want to study a little more about dopamine, and I get this. And I did exactly the same as you. I fell nearly off my chair. So what's the conclusion here? Can you do the same as I?
Yeah, well, if adrenaline is damaging to the brain, the more dope medicine you take, and it would make sense, the worse your outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
They don't want to say that because but I've noticed that personally that if I know that there's days that I am so relaxed, if I remember this Christmas time. Christmas is big in the United States, and I remember being safe and with my family and everything. Um, and I didn't even need my medication.
If you have eaten your medication, your symptoms has got worse, not now, but later.
Yes, yes.
So you are together with me in, what can we say, inventing or exploring the root cause for Parkinson and the solutions to Parkinson. But what you have seen right now, dopamine is the nearly worst thing you can eat.
That is nuts. I I don't know how more people don't. The problem is it's not convenient because I find a lot of people who have Parkinson's want to just take a pill
Of
and
course, that's why I'm a little hesitant with all your the things they're probably pretty good and fine, and maybe most of the population need it, I don't know. But if people can get a pill, they would forget everything else we have told about Wim Hof, about trauma and stress and childhood trauma, and take the pills. And trust me, there will also be someone that didn't need it and still have Parkinson's.
that gives me even um, more motivation to really
Reduce medication, I hope.
yes and
Because stress is your symptoms. It's what push you into fight, flight, and freeze. And you have a little tremor and some stiffness in one of the sides. So part of your body is in freeze. And
yeah
adrenaline, every time you have anxiety, every time you're stressed at work, every time you think back of your childhood or get triggered, you are pushed into fight, flight, and freeze. And every time you take a pill of dopamine, you get more.
that is really powerful. I that just changed my whole yeah I
But just please don't drop the medication from one day to another. You have tried that. So it's slowly and a cut with a knife or a pill cutter, slowly in the next 3 months or so. But you don't need it, trust me. With that little, uh, with that little symptoms you have got now, you will probably become better because you have, in my mind, you have found the key to Parkinson, and it's stress reduction. You have dealt with a lot of the earlier things. You have the door open to the, can we call, new world that you can work with yourself. You do it with cold exposure, but you also have a lot of things going on with mindfulness and awareness of your past and how it has influenced you. So you don't need the dopamine. And if you during the next 3 months where you reduce, something come up, you already have the tools. You check out, if you get more symptomatic tomorrow or in a week, you think, what was going on today? And then, oh, we had a problem with how to get this and this tractor or this and this repairman, and say, oh, that was the stress, or it was my mother's birthday or something. Then you have something to work with because you have opened the door to this mental where, yeah, body and mind is one, and the mental has a space, even if we right now call it a physical disease.
When I was diagnosed, I believe that I have this goal because modern medicine says that there's nobody that's ever really had a DAT scan that I'm aware of that's actually recovered from Parkinson's.
I have one client.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is I'm going to be your second client. At least that's my goal.
Sounds good, but be fast because I have a handful that is.
That's on the way.
Yeah.
No, you are a sweetheart. No, I'm so thankful that I did this thing. But I think that's the key. If Parkinson's, I believe, is a mental disorder with some physical components, but number one, at least my disease, is a mental disorder. When you're 10 years old and you think about dying, I mean, that's not healthy.
No.
You
So
should be thinking
that's
about.
where your foundation was made to the disease many years after.
Yes. I think they can never, I think you're right on because they have been trying, you hear Michael J. Fox 20 years ago saying that in 20 years they'll have the disease beat. But how do you beat a disease that's a mental disorder? You can't unless you change change the way you think and have hope. I think depression is basically hopelessness.
Yeah. And
I mean,
that's what I found out, that was the main thing, the difference between the guys that were stuck and the guys that helped themselves to no symptoms. It was the hope, and that's why I name everything I make with hope. And shortcut, I have spent 10,000 hours finding all this out with my clients, studying the internet. And so that's the shortcut, that you don't have to spend 10,000 hours. You can jump directly onto my shoulder or Gary Sharpe's shoulders, who have found out the same.
well, you are amazing. I you've got it figured out. You can't take a pill and say, "Oh, I'm not going to get rid of this trauma," or you can't.
No. So if people want to be well, they need to do it the hard way. That's good thing is there's a lot of different ways how you can do it, and you have used a strong tool like what do you call plunging in cold water. That's a strong thing. I call it exposure therapy. I do it a more mild way, digging into the traumas and resolving them. But it's also possible, for example, to do a lot of exercise where you use the real way how animals do it. They have traumas as well, because that's actually one of our superpowers. It's how we remember things that's very important. Don't go into that cave because that's where the lions is sleeping. And that's why when we see certain things, we back off. Or if you see the bully from your school, you get a shock, That's because we don't want to go there. That's your superpower. But in a modern world, we are so passive, sitting on our chairs. And our nature is not built to that. So all the stress build up and build up and build up and become physical. But if you have a dog on the leash or maybe a horse, they start to have tremors as well, because if they see a bigger dog or an angry dog, they either want to go and compete, fight it, or want to run away from it. So domestical animals on the leash that cannot escape, they got Parkinson's symptoms as well.
You know, it's funny because I don't have a tremor other than when I'm super stressed. I have to be extremely stressed. I never have like a tremor that isn't stress induced. I don't.
That's what tremors are.
And my mind is so accustomed to it, you don't. But if you step back and look at the times that I start tremoring, it's in times of great stress. It may not be like life threatening, but it is, you know. But you're right. It's crazy.
Your brain, it doesn't navigate with what your logic think is life-threatening or not. It say, is this cold water? Yes, it's life-threatening. I stress myself up. It sends there's something going on in his surroundings that is life-threatening, because it looks like you're bully in first grade, or you are something's going on in your company that makes you move very fast around. Then your instincts say there's a tiger next to this guy, he's running fast already. So to put it a little simple, it's how we work. It's how we have used millions of years to navigate a wild life. But now we're just sitting.
That makes a lot of sense because they can never actually figure out why exercise is so beneficial. But because there's not really a physiological reason why exercise, but if it's using up adrenaline, like you say,
it's doing what we are meant to do. If there's somebody after us, it's run. And the body cannot tell the difference if you are biking or running or whatever you are. And like fighting, it's also boxing. It's you can say the fight types that have want to fight the enemy. So sport, any intensive sport is going into our instincts.
That is so powerful, even with the weight training, because I do feel about as good doing weight training, and it goes back to using up.
It's still using up adrenaline.
Yes.
If you, during an hour, consistently are doing some sort of things, you get sweaty and you get tired and so on. So not that I'm an expert on weightlifting, but of course it uses up your adrenaline if you do it for a longer period.
You got a key there. Every Parkinson's patient needs to have that explained to them. Man.
I spent 3 years, I used to say I used 10,000 hours to find out this, and connecting the dots across the animals kingdom and humans history.
So figured that out about the adrenaline?
That was the first I figured out, that people that has helped themselves and for some reason have the energy to put it on webpage. I read all their stories about what they healed themselves. And some took this supplement, others took another supplement, some did therapy, some did meditation. So I had to read a lot of them, and it was not easy to see the commonalities, but I could see that there was a lot of things that reduced stress in all of them. So I found across all these people, I found these different, and I call it the 4 strategies on how to help yourself reduce stress, because there's many ways, and Parkinson World have found out, some of them, that dancing is good and biking is good and boxing is good. They have found line dance is good and waltz is good and ballroom dancing is good. Yeah. All dancing is good, but only if you like it.
Yeah, if I, it would be the opposite for me. I
Yeah,
can't.
for you, it will induce stress. So you have found other ways. So that was why I find everyone needs to find their own antidote. Because if you don't like dancing, forcing you to do dancing is doing the exact opposite. If you hate biking or running or weightlifting, that's not the cure. But if you find something you fancy,
Yeah.
then there are so many. You can look up nearly any activity and see, even chess, you can find a study that it's benefiting people with Parkinson. So I've figured these patterns out and why each of them work, or rather what's the groups of things. I can nearly put any activity and say, yes, that belongs to that group, that's belong to that group, that belong to that group. So one group we have talked about today is working with your mental health and reducing old traumas. You can even say that the cold water plunge, it's a little in family with trauma therapy, because it's exposure therapy.
Yes, you're basically saying you're okay because you know you're okay. That's exactly what it is. And it's not about the physiological part. It's the saying that, hey, because once I relax and I feel like I'm okay, then it's not harm.
You could probably do the same with a snake if you dare to come close to that for half an hour every day. You could do the same with that. That's exposure to danger, but it wouldn't work for everyone.
No,
So
no, no. Right, right. That's why I think if you can control your mind, you can figure out what works for you. I also do a sauna. I actually have a sauna, so I do it the other side,
yeah,
heat. But it's exposure saying, I'm okay.
yeah.
Because that's ultimately what I want. If I could ask for one thing with my Parkinson's is, and one doctor to tell me that I am okay.
Yeah, but you are okay. You are not diseased. You are just stuck in your instincts for too long during a day, and a little stuck in your dopamine. So, but you can slowly step out of that, and whatever symptoms come up afterward, you can deal with that and say, okay, now I get a little stiffness whenever one of my employees are ill or whatever is going on. You can take the problem and solve that. And sometimes it's something in your here and now. Sometimes you have to go back to your past and solve out why are you so easily getting obsessed with things, to use a word you have used a couple of times. It's our natural instinct that are pushing you into fight, flight, and freeze. And because of modern culture, you cannot, we have not learned how to get out of it again. And the solution is what I call the four strategies. And you have yourself found a handful of activities that fit in.
Do you treat people like me? Like, could you help me? Like, do you do stuff over Skype to help me out?
That's what I do.
You've really opened my eyes because now it makes sense. Parkinson's people are so analytical and they got to figure out why things are the way they are. If you don't explain it, you're not going to believe it. And I believe that you've really found something.
You need to allow yourself to dig deep in whatever was in your past. And some people have a few big traumas. Some people have a load of smaller things. And for some, it's fast For most, it takes a long time, but becoming better is also nice.
You know what? You've onto something here. That's if there was ever going to be a cure for Parkinson's, this is the way you do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And you can say there is no cure because there is no disease.
that's even a better way to look at it.
There is no disease. It's just a conflict between our biology and the modern world.
You're amazing. That makes perfect sense. I thought I knew everything about Parkinson's.
You soon know everything about Parkinson.
I don't need to have a cure because maybe the disease isn't there.
You can say it's not interesting if it's your head or your body. It's your instincts. Because of your upbringing, because of fears during your life, your busy company, one day it was too much for your body, and the symptoms of stress become more and more physical. But even you have had these plus 5 years with Parkinson, you have also realized some days where you were just calm, and after your cold water plunges, you are calm. And when you're calm, you have no symptoms. When you have no symptoms, you have no chronic disease, but you have signs of going in and out of stress.
That is so simple, but so powerful. Another thing that's always come in my head is these complex, supposedly complex problems can have really simple solutions. When I thought my fight with Parkinson's, it's really quite simple. I mean, if you really think about it, if you think about the culture we were raised in, and that we're 100,000 years old at least, and our bodies, we're in ancient bodies with current cultures.
So it's a little like you are a hunter. So if you took one of your, I don't even know the name for the animals you shoot, say something. The deer, if you take a deer inside your office and say, this is your home, would you think it would be stressed as hell? Would you think that it would get symptoms sooner or later? Yeah.
That analogy, you're a genius. That's really smart. Yeah. Holy cow. When it boils down to it, it's it's really quite simple. I mean, if it it makes sense. This needs to explode. This when I said that most people won't do it, I think most people won't do it until a lot of people do it.
We are brought up with the doctor and science is having the solutions on everything, but not in this case. They are digging into your brain and you don't find the answer there. You find the answer by looking up, looking to the side, to the animals, to looking back in history, by talking to the experts, the guy that actually has done it and become better.
You're a saint. You're a really.
You can say it took me 3 years to find out all this. So it's what you have seen here is an extract. But this is guys that have been in war. They say that 15% of the population, the soldiers, here's one with Parkinson's face.
I saw a bunch of people had Parkinson's that just, well, I can't imagine how traumatizing war would be. And that makes perfect sense.
These guys, they have been in World War I. It was soldiers that came home broken, not shot, not being wounded, but being close to stress, close to, I don't know, bomb that fell down, seeing some dead comrades.
Oh.
So that's what stress can do to you.
Whoa, that's crazy. The reason I say that is because the opposite, when I first figured out that I had Parkinson's, I had the same symptoms for multiple years. And then I got to that point where I knew that I had Parkinson's, and my Parkinson's got so much worse. Supposedly Parkinson's moves very, very slowly. Well, how does that work? Because in 3 months, it was so slow. It was not slow at all. If I would have continued on that pace, I would have been dead. If I would have continued on the pace that I was in those 3 months, I would be literally in a wheelchair or dead.
And
So they
if you went to the neurologist and said, I have more symptoms, what would he do?
give you more medication.
And that's more dopamine. The dopamine converts to adrenaline. What happened? More symptoms.
Oh my heck, it's so simple.
Then you go to a neurologist, say, I've got more symptoms. What does he do? Give you more
More
medication.
exacerbates the problem. It keeps making the problem worse and worse. But if you just stop, and that's what I found with the Wim Hof. When I stop and I'm not stressed, and it basically my it's like my body just relaxes. There's been moments that I've had Parkinson's where I don't feel like
So
I
the
have Parkinson's.
moment you are relaxed, you are cured. Because there's nothing to cure. It's your body that say is calm. We cancel the fight, flight, and freeze. Back to rest and digest. It's not more difficult than that.
You are awesome. Do you treat people like
There's no miracles in what I'm doing, but I listen to your story. I hear some body memories from your past about this compulsion, a way to attack the world, how to be in the world. That's a big one. I hear something about your father and mother that was the trigger for the more physical part. So until that, you have built up stress, and it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yep.
So what we do is trauma for trauma, body memory for body memory. We resolve all these things. I know so much about the disease, so I can explain if you have other struggles.
Now it all makes sense. Like your explanation of the deer, putting them in the office. We are a deer, we are an animal that's basically put into this situation that we're not accustomed to. I mean, that's basically what we are. Took hundreds of thousands of years to evolve to where we're at. And now we're in that office not knowing what's going on.
In 50 years, we have changed from being a farmer culture to an office culture. And our body cannot cope with it because then there's email coming that have intriguing content, and then the mailman come with a bill, and your children come home from school are bullied, or your wife are mad at you, or all the time you get these triggers.
I've often wondered if I never went to the neurologist and I just relaxed. Because I went down so quickly, so fast, what happens if I would have done the exact opposite of what I did? People need to hear this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm share it to everybody. I'm pretty awesome what you're doing here. I thought that when I started this that I'd be teaching everybody, and you taught me more than I ever told anybody else, but pretty powerful.
It's my idea to build not a school, but a course or a class where I can help professionals that already have a skill and on board them with this extra layer of knowledge about instincts, trauma response and what have you, so they can help more people. But I want to build a business where I make this community. I ensure that there are content so people hopefully every day in a future can go and get new knowledge around the subjects that helps them, that I can find more professionals that can, so we can help more and more people.
That sounds great.
We cannot come a lot closer to the truth. It is the conflict between our lifestyle and our instincts. There is no disease, just a ton of signals from your body telling that red light, something is wrong here, do something.
You need to get this information out. I just think it's so important.
And me and Gary Sharpe is one of the first guys that have sort of come across most of it and connected the dopamine, adrenaline, trauma, stress, mind, body, and all this.